Hey folks, so this is Pub Night, and I just wanted to try and give a little bit of advice on the True Sim Tour at TGC Tours. A lot of people just sort of asking questions, trying to get used to no aids play. I'm not a great video game golfer, but I'm a pretty fair real life golfer, and I think in general, I just wanted to try and give some people some tips on how to play it from the eyes of a real golfer. So we're on Wildfire Ridge here, the Pro T version, which is round one in this week's TST. So first things first, I always start off, I've just started right from here, skip the flyby and whatnot, just testing the recordings. And first things first, check out your overhead view and look at the dots. So in this case, we've got a relatively straight fairway. We see our waypoints. We know it's 300 yards. There's basically nothing to worry about there in terms of running a drive through the fairway. We have the wind in our face. Because it's a tee shot, we aren't really worried that much about the strength, but what you should do and get in the habit of is paying attention to everything. I have the ambient sound down here for the microphone, but if you hit the option key on your controller, you'll have a look at the flag. You see that flag there is barely moving. It's twitching a little bit. On a guess, I'm going to say that's probably somewhere between 3 and 5 miles per hour. Now, it's not as precise in TST, so it's not dead still. It might be now. But the main thing we want to do is we want to use our drives to sort of help us figure it out. So, got my driver here, just going to try and make a decent swing.
Did you just use Thor's hammer?
Hit that one pretty good.
Just kidding. That was a big drive, though.
So we heard the bump at about 263. And that's one thing, like, use sort of all your senses, use your follow cam if you don't mind doing that, unless you want to go pure sim. But, so 263, so the drive flew 2 yards less in the air than it normally would. Well, that's pretty minimal. So we have a look at the flag again. It's twitching. So, probably somewhere, it's a good rule of thumb is if the flag is pointing straight out and not flapping, it's basically 14 miles an hour or a little bit higher. If it's at a relatively constant 45 degrees relative to the ground, that's about 7. So using those two gauges, so if it's fluttering between straight down and 45 degrees, it's somewhere between 0 and 7. If it's between 45 degrees and parallel to the ground, it's somewhere between 7 and 14. That's just a real general rule of thumb. So with that flag flipping there the way it is right now, I would say that's probably about 5 miles an hour. 5 miles an hour, the wind is slightly in our face, so I'm going to give it about 5, probably maybe 7 yards worth of credit. Turning a little bit, and I call it 7 yards worth of credit. We got 123 yards to the flag, so I'm figuring it's going to be 130 in the air to the stick. So we're going to grab our 9-iron, which goes 132. We're going to take just a little bit off it. We're going to put a little bit of fade on it just to try and keep it relatively straight. We got a little bit of a downslope here. The ball is probably going to go off to our right, and then try and make a good swing. It's not bad. It's a little right. So let's have a look. See what we're going to do here. Distance-wise wasn't bad. So the wind might have been a little bit stronger than we thought. Maybe, somewhere 5 to 7-ish. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to kind of whittle it down. But we got a 13-foot putt for birdie. Now here's where everybody really gets baffled. How do you read the greens? And it's more art than science, folks. But in a general rule of thumb, a couple different things you can do. You can toggle the flag, see if the flag is sitting at an obvious angle or not. That one to me looks like it's leaning a little bit to the right. The other thing you can do is use your putting camera, get right down to the ground and have a look. The one thing I like to do is I like to do a bit of a spin. So when I'm down here, I'm just pushing my stick to the right. I'm going to do a bit of a circle, and I'm going to kind of see what my impressions are. Here, I'm not seeing anything that really jumps out at me. Maybe I've got a little bit of a ridge in behind, so maybe a little bit left to right. But generally, nothing really obvious. And that's kind of what you're looking for at first. You're looking for obvious breaks. Down at this level, I'm not seeing anything really obvious. I'm seeing maybe, from the slope of the ground behind me, behind my golfer, maybe something a little bit right to left, but the cup looks relatively parallel. I look for cup slopes. I would anticipate with a right to left break that that cup should be slanting to the right. It's not. It's flat, so that could be a little bit left to right as well. Just kind of going around, but in general, I'm seeing more or less a relatively straight putt. So downhill, 1 inch. I'm going to give it a couple feet worth of credit. Just the general impression of the green. I'm thinking maybe just a hair. I'm going to just give it just a hair right to left. And try and make a good stroke on it. And there we go. So that's easy, right? So let's try the second hole. So now, it all starts with the flyby. Let's watch the flyby. And what I'm doing in general on, I'm always trying to figure out if the flag is a green light or red light, but I'm looking at the hole. So this is looking like probably a par 5 or a long par 4, and I'm kind of plotting my path. See that shack in behind the green, maybe 100 yards back? It's right in line with the flag from the fairway, so that's a good target point. But notice to the right there, that green really slopes off to the right, so we want nothing to do with the right side of that green, whatever our approach shot is. Gonna have a look at the overhead. So we see that big fairway bunker that we can see straight through there. We could drive it into that if we aren't careful. And if we're gonna want to bend the corner a little bit, so we're going to adjust our aim to make sure we got nothing to do with that fairway bunker. We should be safe there if we hit a relatively straight shot. Wind's directly in our face. It's blowing a little bit. It's definitely better than 7 miles an hour now. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, 8, 9, maybe 10, but probably more like 8, 9, something like that is what I would guess from that. And that's experimentation. That's playing with your wind meter on and having a look at the flag. What does an 8 mile an hour flag look like? What does an 8 mile an hour wind flag look like? What does a 10 mile an hour? It's a lot of trial and error. It's experimentation. So we got our tee shot lined up, we got our driver selected, and we're going to make a good swing.
Looks like you'll be in the short stuff.
Pulled it a little bit. That's my tendency, but that's a good shot. I don't mind that. So 257 is when it bounced. So we lost about 8 yards worth of flight there.
230 yards
now,
to the pin here.
So that flag, definitely more than 7. I don't know if it's 10, maybe 9, but it's in our face, so we got to give it about 13 yards worth of credit. It's going to push it to the right. So you remember that shack way back behind the green? The graphics kind of obscuring it. That's going to be our target line because the wind should push this to the right, or sorry, push it to the left. We're going to hit our 3-wood, and we're going to hope we get there. I pulled it. That was a horrible swing. That's probably a bunker. Oh no, it's over the bunker. Bounced at 225. Stop. Please stop. Yeah, it's not stopping.
In the rough.
Not a bad shot. I thought the wind was maybe going to be a little bit stronger. And the 3-wood's out of the fairway now. They've changed it, so there's a much bigger variation, which isn't a bad thing. I like that, but it makes it a little bit tougher sometimes. So a greenside chip here, we're seeing we're 7 inches downhill. That's a pretty big drop off. So we're definitely going to want to chip this, I think, because we're in the shag. But it's going to drop off if we do, oops. Same sort of thing with the chipping camera. You can use that cycle and you can move the camera around. Oh, thanks, tree. You can move that camera around to try and get a pretty good view. So you can see, hopefully you can see, about halfway between my golfer and the flag, there's a ridge line there. So that's going to drop off to that flag. It's kind of diagonal. It's basically halfway between my golfer and the flag. These are some of the subtleties that you'll learn to look for. Is kind of, again, it's real golfer's eyes talking there. So that's everything about this is telling me that's going to go relatively sharply right from my golfer's perspective, relatively sharply right to left. So I got a pretty big drop, but I'm hitting out of some shag. I don't want to do anything silly. I just want to try and cozy this up and not screw up and hit it off the green. So let's try and hit a nice, gentle little lob wedge chip shot here. Catch the ridge. Go across. Please stop. Watch your trail. End of that trail, that ball didn't do anything. So it was rolling relatively straight or relatively flat when it stopped rolling. So we flip back and forth to our views. It's a short putt, generally inside of 5 feet. I know it might take a bit of a gut check, but don't play a lot of break. Just hit it firm at the hole. You're basically trying to hit it firm enough that it doesn't have time to break. You're not ripping on it, but you're giving it enough credit.
Time to send this ball on its way.
Okay, we'll do one more here, par 4. And this is where you try and figure out different drives and try and play a little real golfer mentality. So short dogleg par 4. We got a whole bunch of crap to the right. I don't think we want anything to do with that. The wind's going to be in our face off the tee. We can see from the flag it's standing up pretty good. So that's probably about a 10-mile-an-hour wind, I would say. Let's have a look at the flag here. Yeah, it's standing up pretty good. So that might be 10, might even be 12. It's still got some flap in it, though. So I'm probably good about credit for 10. Now, so you might be tempted to try and fly over this stuff. Let's have a look at our overhead. See from our overhead there, the 250 marker, which is about, your 3-wood's going to land, or your driver's going to land a little bit past that. So if you go at the angle, that's about 3/4 of the way through that big bunker. We don't want that. With a 10-mile-an-hour wind in our face, we're definitely not going to get there. So, but if you see the oddly shaped bunker to the right on the overhead view of the 250-yard marker, that looks like it would probably be about, 275 yards, but into a wind, we aren't going to get it there. So let's aim at that. Hopefully we judged everything right. We're going to cut a little bit off the corner here. Give it a little bit of room just to be safe, and make a good swing.
Man, did you ever launch that?
Yep, down. Okay. Closer than I thought it was going to be, so that wind landed around 258 or so.
Looking at 125.
Okay, 125 uphill, about 22 feet, so it's going to have about 5 to 7 yards on it. So I'll call that 132. Have a look at our flag. Maybe about 8. I'll call that 140. 140. It's close to the front. I think you want to make sure you carry that. So 145. A 7-iron with 1 up loft. That's about 141. I'm just going to push it. Let's hope that's about right. The stronger the wind, the less specific you can be, and the more you've got to factor in margin of error. Not bad. Maybe a yard or 2 long. So if I called that about 10, maybe it's more like an 8 or 9. So if you look at our overhead again, we can't see our flag because we're putting. Never mind. Okay. Tricky putt here, 14 feet downhill 2 inches, so it's going to be moving. Not the sort of putt you can take a run on. Once you start getting over 10, 12 feet, downhills, tricky putts, you're generally not trying to sink it, you're trying to not 3-putt it. You're trying to make your par safe. So keep that in mind. So we'll give her a little look here. That's telling me maybe, maybe a little bit of a slope from left to right, just from looking at it. Do our little cycle. Looks like there's maybe a bit of a ridge there. Yeah. I think I see a bit of a mound, kind of 25% of the way between my golfer and the hole, maybe 30% of the way. I see something that looks like a little bit of a ridge line. So I think it's going to go up and then down a ridge. I think that's going to be a little bit left to right, is what we're looking at. Come back over here. Yeah, I think that's going to fall from my golfer's left to his right at the hole. Not a lot, but a little bit. But again, it's a downhill putt, 14 feet. We can't really take much of a run at it. So we're going to move this over here. I'm just trying to cozy something up to the hole. Yeah, it's pretty straight. Pretty straight.
Moving right along here.
So, we played 3 holes. We're 2 under par. That's not bad shooting. Hopefully that helps you guys.